Buonasera e benvenuti alla presentazione
Good
del nuovo
afternoon,
piano
and
industriale
welcome to
2029 del gruppo Hera.
Hera Group's
Cedo la parola al
new business plan to
direttore
2029
generale
presentation. The floor now
presidente
goes to
Fabri.
Mr. Christian
Prego,
Fabri,
Presidente.
Hera's Executive Chairman.
Grazie, di nuovo buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody.
Siamo oggi a illustrarvi il piano industriale, ma
We are
come
here to
di
illustrate our business plan today,
consuetudine partiamo con
but as
una
usual,
stima,
let's
il
begin
forecast dei
by giving you
risultati del
our best
2025
possible
che
forecast
ci
regarding
vedono
2025
oggi
results,
con un EBITDA superiore a un
with an
miliardo e
EBITDA which
530
stands
milioni,
above
con un utile
1,530 billion
superiore a
euros,
460
with a
milioni di
net
euro, in
profit which
crescita
stands
del
above 460 million
4%,
euros, up
e
4%
con un
compared to last
rapporto
year, and with
PFN
a
EBITDA
net debt
che
to
è
EBITDA ratio
inferiore a
which is
2.6,
lower
che
than
è
2.6
sicuramente
times.
un risultato molto positivo
This is a
che
very positive result
ci
for us,
porta in una condizione di stabilità di debito rispetto
allowing us to be
all'anno
stable
precedente,
as
pressoché
far as debt
stabile,
is
in una
concerned
condizione
compared
di
to the previous
lenta
year,
crescita degli utili,
with a
nonostante, come vedete
further
nel grafico a
growth
destra,
in profit,
una
despite the
consistente
fact that,
riduzione
as
della
you can see on
contribuzione
the graph on the right-hand
delle
side,
temporary
we had
opportunities
a
che sono state
sharp
completamente,
dip
a livello di
in
fatturato netto,
temporary opportunities, which, as
compensate
far as
dalle
net
componenti
profit is
di crescita
concerned, have
organica.
been
Temporary
entirely
opportunities
offset
che
by
in 6
organic
anni
growth.
ci hanno portato
Over the past
oltre
6
20
years,
anni di EBITDA
temporary
accumulato di
opportunities
circa
have
900
given us
milioni, con
a
un
accumulated
contributo
EBIT
importante,
contribution worth
e
900
che
million euros, a major
ci ha aiutato a
contribution,
crescere rapidamente, che adesso
which
stiamo
allowed us to grow
compensando, mantenendo un
rapidly.
percorso
And
di
that is something that
crescita
we are now
a
offsetting
livello di
by keeping our
utili
growth
complessivi. Il salto grosso fra 24 e 25 è stato
while
molto
standing at
considerevole. Abbiamo ancora una
considerable net
fettina,
profit levels.
diciamo, di questi contributi
We still
da
have a
assorbire
slight
nel
dip of
prossimo
the
anno, ma
contribution from
siamo molto soddisfatti
temporary
di questi primi
opportunities that will
risultati,
be absorbed next
di
year,
queste
but we're
anticipazioni
quite
sui risultati del
satisfied
2025.
with the this overview of
Entriamo
the
adesso
2025 results.
più specificatamente
Now,
nel business
moving on
plan,
to the business plan more
che
specifically,
parte riconfermando di fatto il
we can
nostro
begin by
multi-business
basically
model,
confirming our multi-business model,
sostenuto
a
dall'economia di
model which
scala,
is
perché
supported
sapete
by
ormai che
economies of
su
scale.
tutti i principali
As you
business
know,
siamo
when it
forse i
comes to
principali operatori di
all of the
mercato
main
in
businesses, we are
termini
now
dimensionali, e quindi questo ci
among the market leaders
consente
in terms of
di
size.
avere le sinergie specifiche
This
del
allows us to
business, ma
have
anche, di fare
business-specific
sinergia
synergies,
sul
but it
portafoglio
also
di
allows
attività.
us to create
È un
synergies in
modello
our
che ci aiuta
activities
a
portfolio.
ehm,
This is a model
trasferire
which
dal
allows us
business
to
all'altro le innovazioni, le
transfer
idee
innovation
che
and
nascono su uno
ideas from
specifico
one business
business,
to
che
the other,
possono essere applicate anche
ideas
a
which
altre
begin on a
attività,
specific
ma
business and which are then
soprattutto ci permette
transposed
di
to other
trasferire i flussi
businesses.
di cassa
But it
generati
also
da
allows us
alcuni
to
business, cioè
transfer
di
the
altri
cash
business,
flow
che
generated
poi
by
vedono
some businesses
l'opportunità
to
di
others
securitizzare
as a way of
la cassa
creating
generata
opportunities or to
sui business.
um,
E il fatto di usare
secure
un modello multi-business ci
the
consente
cash
anche di
generated. The
avere
fact that we're a
più
multi-business
driver di
model
crescita
also
e
allows us
anche
to
di
have
avere
a
più
number
opportunità
of growth
sui
drivers.
vari
It also
mercati nei
allows
quali
us to
operiamo, e
seize
anche di avere
opportunities
una
in the various
fiducia del
markets we
cliente più
operate in.
alta,
Plus, we can have a
quindi
higher
lavorando
customer
su
loyalty rate
multiservizio, e
by
quindi sul portafoglio di
working
servizi
on
offerti al
our
cliente, ma anche
service portfolios that we offer
lavorando
to our
sull'investimento che
customers,
possiamo fare su tutta la
but we
struttura
also leverage
dell'operazione del
on the
cliente,
investments we can
che
make in our
ovviamente
customer
beneficia di migliori
management
risultati
system
rendendo
that, of course,
costi
benefits quality,
fisiologici più bassi.
given the fact that
Se
thanks to synergies,
entriamo
our costs
adesso,
are
diciamo,
lower.
nella strategia che
Now,
abbiamo
moving on to the
definito per ogni
strategy
singolo
we have
business,
defined for
partendo da
each
quelli che sono i
single
macro
business.
trend del settore. Ora
We can begin with the sector's macro
riassumo in una
trends.
slide
Now,
tutto è un
summarizing
po' articolato,
everything in one
complicato,
slide is a little
ma abbiamo
complicated,
cercato di cogliere gli elementi
although we did
principali
try
sia
to
dei macro trend
extract
ma
the
anche
main
della
elements,
nostra
both when it
strategia
comes to macro trends,
a
but
macro
also when
titolo.
it comes to
Se
our
partiamo dall'acqua,
strategy for the
sapete
various
bene che
macro
sul
titles, the
mondo
macro
dell'acqua
items.
ci
Beginning with
troviamo a
water.
fronteggiare
As you
eventi
know,
climatici
in the water
estremi,
business, we
come gli
face
alluvioni,
extreme weather
e
events
quindi dalle piogge
from
molto intense per i
floods
siccità.
to extreme rain
Siamo in
to
un
droughts.
contesto in cui la normativa
We
europea,
live in a
come lo
context in
sapete a livello
which
italiano,
European
viene
regulations and
in
how they are
aggiornamento,
transposed in Italian
delle
legislation
restrizioni
uh,
sul
is
mondo
marked
delle
by an
depurazioni,
increase in
sul mondo della
restrictions when it comes to
potabilizzazione, manutenzioni
purification,
con soglie sempre più basse
uh,
sugli inquinanti, e
with
quindi con la necessità
a
anche di un
specific
settore
focus on
di
lowering
fare
pollutants.
investimenti. E
Therefore, this
partiamo
sector
da un
requires
impianto
investments.
infrastrutturale
And
del
of course, we
settore
also have to
molto
face
rilevante.
a very relevant infrastructure gap in the sector. Of course, in the past, our assets were able to benefit from major investments, meaning that currently they are perfectly adequate, but we have to continue to allow them to evolve by continuing to be in line with these trends, which amplify their impact, especially, and will do so, especially in the future. That's why we are working to increase the availability and the procurement of water. We are working to reduce leakages in our water distribution activities. And we're also working to improve all of our activities when it comes to sewage. Keep in mind that our sewage systems date back to many years ago in some locations, whereas the newer parts of the sewage systems were designed also based on rainfall levels. And in the past, these extreme events used to happen every 15 to 20 years, whereas nowadays they tend to happen every year. So even in this sector, we have worked on improving our infrastructure. We are also boosting reusing water. And as we do this, as we invest in this direction, we also use innovation and digitization to maximize our impacts and to obtain efficiency on the entire system. Moving on to energy. If we look at the evolution of trends, even on a 15-year span to 2040, what we see is that energy consumption, or rather final energy consumption, will be reduced by 20%. An increasingly large of final consumption will be driven by electricity, gas, both due to global warming and due to efficiency, and the trend we're seeing will be reduced. But in 15 years' time, we will still be facing a situation in which a third of the final consumption will be supported by gas, and a further one-third by electricity. So basically, we are facing a major demand for energy efficiency, for decarbonization of consumption, and infrastructure, which needs to be capable of dealing with the energy transition. Now, what is our strategy? When it comes to gas, we will continue to make sure our networks are efficient. We will continue to invest to make sure that they are up to par, so that they can be ready to manage green gases, which are another new element in our networks, which will help decarbonization. And when it comes to the electricity grids, we will be increasing our hosting capacity. During the business plan period, it will be up 30%. And with all of these investments, we will also be working to continue to improve efficiency in managing our infrastructure. When it comes to sales and our activities to support renewable energies, even here we have a clear strategy. Namely, we want to continue to help our customers in their decarbonization path through offers regarding energy efficiency and regarding the development of renewables linked to consumption centers, with a focus on customers and consumption centers, which means to have proximity-driven plants. What this means is that despite being owned by us, with long-term contracts, we can supply energy directly to one or two major industrial customers. And we are also going to implement CRM. When it comes to customer loyalty, we have a good service level, but our goal is to continue to improve services to customers, both when it comes to our physical networks, but we also want to improve our relations and marketing through the support of our artificial intelligence, something we're already using and we want to continue doing throughout the business plan years. Moving on to the waste business, you are well aware of the situation regarding infrastructure in Italy, and you also know that European directives are becoming increasingly stringent when it comes to the circular economy, to boost reusing primary and secondary materials. This, of course, gives us plenty of opportunities to expand, along with the very fragmented sector. So our strategy is very straightforward. We want to expand our plant capacity so that we can expand our ability to treat waste in our plants. We want to continue to increase our intermediation activities on waste. Plus, we also want to explore new circular economy potentials, along with continuing to improve our global waste management services, the ones we offer to our customers, by increasing our activities portfolio and also expanding our customer base. Moving on to our strategic priorities, the ones that we want to focus on. There is a certain degree of continuity in our activities. We have a very strong focus on value creation. We want to make sure that our growth isn't purely based on volume, as we also want to increase profitability. At the same time, we also want to continue with our hedging model, allowing us to sterilize the impact of all external macros, such as inflation, the cost of money, the fluctuation in energy prices, which, due to how the business is made and due to our choices, we try to fully hedge. And our multi-business model is very helpful in this regard because, as I was saying earlier, we have different drivers leading to growth, and therefore we can allocate lower risk when it comes to the execution of the drivers. Although in the past, I think it's safe to say that we never had any major and negative surprises on execution. Sustainability is also a theme which has always been a part of us, not as a cost, but as a further opportunity to create value. Because in this regard, we want to take advantage of all of the new constraints and targets set by the European Union so that we can find the right space between obligations and incentives, allowing us to work in different sectors and supporting customers to find room for profitability in the development of our assets and in the things we want to do, which means that we will continue with these strategic priorities and we will continue to allow our business to evolve and grow. Now, let's take a look at what we intend to do when it comes to the three main pillars in our strategic priorities, beginning with value creation. On the left-hand side, we have the internal part of the company. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the effects in terms of total shareholders' return. Beginning with inside the company, you can note that our goal is to continue to have a 400 basis point spread, and the difference between our ROI and the sector's WACC with a structural ROI growth. In 2024, we had an 8.8% ROI, which is the structural ROI net of the temporary opportunities contribution. So we want to have growth, a structural profitability, and a 25% growth in net invested capital, which means that these are the two levers we want to use to increase profitability. If we then look at the effects on total shareholders' return, structurally speaking, if you consider the structural EPS, we have a 6% growth and a yield on dividend per share, which is above 4% on average throughout the business plan, which means that we are confirming a double-digit TSR. Moving on to the topic of resilience, you are familiar with our approach to hedging, linked to the external macros, which may have an impact on our business. We want to have full control on the business. We don't want to be exposed to any volatility coming inside the company from the outside. We want to be we want to reduce how exposed we are. As an example, I can cite the hedging on commodities, especially energy, which, as you know, has proven to be very effective, even in times in which prices went up in a major way. When it comes to long-term risks linked to climate change, we have been working for quite some time on improving our assets and networks resilience, and we will continue doing so because this helps us, on the one hand, to improve the overall profitability, and on the other, it reduces any potential impact there may be from any extreme events on our businesses, which gives us a double advantage in the future. If we turn to the topic of sustainability, we confirm that we will continue working on three macro axes. Decarbonization, which means that we are confirming our path towards net zero in 2050. And even here, our goal is to work together with customers to extract value both for ourselves and for them throughout this process. 1.3 billion of our investment plan, which accounts for 5.5 billion totally, will be invested to improve this axis. 2 billion will be used to implement all of our goals linked to the circular economy, whereas 2.6 billion will be focused on improving the resilience of our assets. I kept innovation as the last topic. Innovation, when it comes to strategic levers, is underlying in all businesses. And when it comes to innovation, we work in a number of different directions. On the one hand, we want to innovate our assets. Think of the frontier activities we're working on when it comes to carbon fiber or rigid plastics. We are basically opening up new business opportunities and growing volumes on that part of the market. But we're also working on cutting-edge initiatives such as hydrogen. In this case, our investment is almost entirely financed by National Recovery Resilience Plan funding, and next year, 2 of our plants will be up and running. If we then focus on technology, in this case, this is a very broad world, of course, because in this case, we can use both traditional technology to improve the digitization of our assets and networks, which leads to us having 2 effects. On the one hand, we can better control our activities remotely by increasing the efficiency and effectiveness on our networks. But we also want to be able to acquire data sets that can help us evolve the business with prediction-based models. Along with these applications, which use more traditional technologies, but which we apply to make our business more digital, we also have innovation regarding certain types of equipment. We have patented our gas meter, which has safety features linked to earthquakes or a cut in gas in households. It is able to detect gas leakages in the household to guarantee the safety of those who use gas. But we also have valves which we use on our gas networks, which can be used remotely, allowing us to intercept gas leakages increasingly swiftly to improve safety, but also to reduce methane gas emissions. And then we also have devices that can help us measure climate change and rainfall levels to detect any possible landslides or land movements, which in the long run can lead to damage. And even in this field, we are investing so that our networks can be equipped with these types of devices and equipment. Finally, artificial intelligence can support our business. In our networks, for instance, we use digitization and AI to create the digital twins of our networks, allowing us to better manage our flows, but also to identify damage and focus on predictive maintenance to reduce leakages, allowing us to increase efficiency, but so that we can also allocate capital in a more effective way, as we could do with our investments to renew our infrastructure. But we also have process applications, which we already use in certain areas, specifically the market, and we will have to push in this direction to support both our predictive models through machine learning, but also to use automation that we are going to implement increasingly throughout the business plan years, so we can have pieces of our process which aren't supported by AI, but which are built with these agents so that we can further optimize our activities and be increasingly efficient and effective, so that we can use our resources to improve performances or for investments. Moving on to our capital allocation strategy, our investments. We have a clear strategy beginning with the three priorities which act in synergy between themselves. We allocate most of our development to our core businesses with the goal of increasing our investments to accelerate growth on core businesses. The current investment plan, which is up compared to last year, compared to the previous 5-year period, now envisages an investment level which is 40% higher, generally speaking. We also have the goal of keeping a balanced business portfolio because, as we explained earlier, this gives us a certain number of advantages and stability and predictability over time, which allows us to continue to be resilient and profitable in our business, but it also allows us to maintain a good level of financial flexibility so that we can take advantage of any opportunities which are not included in the current business plan. I was mentioning the fact that our investment plan is worth 5.5 billion, which includes 0.5 billion, which is covered by financing, which don't have to be repaid. This goes to 2.5 to maintain our infrastructure, and the remaining amount to develop further our infrastructure. 2.6 billion is included in organic development, and in the business plan, we also have an M&A contribution, especially in the waste sector and in energy. 60% of our investments will go to regulated businesses. In this context, let's take a look at the evolution of the profitability of each individual business, taking into account that for the regulated businesses, we have included the evolution of the regulatory WACC, beginning with 2024, and a reduction we've seen in 2025 of the main businesses, which, as you can see, stand at around 6% recognized WACC. But we are also working on the liberalized businesses, especially when it comes to the treatment of industrial waste and waste more in general, which will increase its profitability based on our commercial development and on the new plans that we will be building, moving up from 11% to 13.6%. Whereas for energy supply, structurally in 2024, we had a 20% profitability, and we wish to confirm that profitability even in the future business scenario, with a profitability level that we feel is already at a good level and which we want to maintain. Let's move to the development brought about by the investment allocation on each individual business. As you can see, the structural growth of each business is in line in the business plan period, so that at the end of the business plan, we will have an EBIT contribution which is very balanced between the three business areas. Moving on to a closer look at how we can generate and then allocate our cash flows. In this slide, you can see the various dynamics per business beginning with waste, a business with a free cash flow equal to 1.6 billion over the business plan period. And after net working capital and maintenance capex, we have a free cash flow worth 0.8 before our development investments. In this case, we considered both the organic growth and the M&A contribution we've included in the business plan, so that we will then be reinvesting the entire cash flow generated, because this is the business that we have plenty of investment opportunities in with a good profitability. Energy. In this case, we generate 2.3 billion in operating cash flow. Maintenance investment in this case is limited to 600 million, with a free cash flow worth 1.7 billion all in all. We mainly focus on sales to customers. We have a development investment which is very limited, and even the investment on renewables, along with the models I was mentioning earlier, which means that we have 1.2 in cash flow that can be reallocated, partly to support our dividend policy and partly to grow in networks which absorb more cash than what they generate. And therefore, the operating cash flow of the networks is in line with that of the energy sector. This is a very capital-intensive business, and therefore the free cash flow stands at 900 million, with a reinvestment on development worth 1.4 billion, which leads to the growth of RAB, which means that we will be using the cash flows and we will be securitizing them in the businesses, the regulated businesses, which have major visibility for the future. Not that we have any concerns for the others, but also because they are linked to our hedging policies, and we will continue to grow in this regard. But obviously, when it comes to maintaining a balanced portfolio, we are working to make sure that our networks grow even quicker than they would on a standalone basis. Now we saw the overview with a business by business breakdown. We can now look at the group cash flows. We'll begin with the 6.2 in operating cash flow, and then after having allocated all of the maintenance investments, we will have a free cash flow worth 3.5 billion. 1.4 billion will be used for dividends. 2.5 billion will be used for development capex and for M&A, and then 300 million will be the debt that we will be consolidating for M&A, with an overall debt level which will be up 700 million, which is in line with what we had forecast in the previous business plan, with a financial leverage level which stands at 2.6 times, which is consistent with the level that we expect to have at the end of 2025, which still guarantees a certain degree of financial flexibility for any further opportunities, both in terms of M&A, which still aren't obvious, but which do tend to come up with a certain degree of frequency, which will be focused on the main businesses, with a very careful focus on prices, so as to not dilute multiples, but also for any extra investments which may be authorized over the next 12 months, which would then be re-included in next year's business plan when we review it, which means that we have room for new initiatives and for further growth compared to what we have inserted. We can now move on to the bottom line, the overall effects. Now, if we consider the growth of structural profit, you'll notice that CAGR stands at 6%, which is also linked to the major initiatives we're working on. Keep in mind that we only consider the structural part because, as usual, we don't include any contributions from temporary opportunities, which aren't included in the development of the business plan. So we basically only look at the structural evolution of our business. The good results we obtained in 2025 and the increase in our targets we expect to obtain in the business plan, along with the financial flexibility that we will have for the entire business plan period, allows us to be confident and to increase our commitment for future dividends. As you know, we guarantee a floor when it comes to our dividend policy, euro cents per share. Last year, we're expecting to have a level worth 17 cents, whereas at the end of this business plan period, we'll be up to 19 cents. And in June, we will be paying dividends for the 2025 results, and that will go up some 7% compared to what we had paid in 2024. So even in this case, we will continue to increase our profit and our overall dividend levels. We now have a few slides to focus on the industrial evolution of our main businesses, beginning with energy, before I give the floor to Orazio. In energy, beginning with our main asset, our customers, and in the business plan, we're confirming the evolution of our customer base, the one we expected, and based on that evolution, we will be maintaining a portfolio level equal to 4.5 million customers, even at the end of the business plan period. In this case, we begin with 4.6 million customers at the end of last year, with a significant 1 million customer growth. Here, we're still seeing a certain degree of a churn on STG. The temporary opportunities, of course, are linked to some supply points, which won't be expected in the future. They will disappear. Then we have a small contribution from our commercial activities and a contribution from the M&A activities that we expect to have in this sector. One of the challenges that we have proven to be able to meet is the sale of value-added services that we've included throughout the supply chain, all the way from retail to the major industrial players, with a portfolio of solutions that can be either one-off or recurrent, and which we are offering to our customers with a good feedback from them. So this is one of the assets you can use along with other levers, which allow us to increase the value of our customer asset. Let's now move on to the dynamics we're seeing financially. If we begin with 2024 and the EBITDA deriving from energy supply, it was very consistent. This was an EBITDA which, of course, also included the contribution of temporary opportunities worth some 180 million euros. And as we're saying, temporary opportunities will be completely removed throughout the business plan period. And therefore, the adjusted figures for 2024 were at around 495 million compared to an adjusted level in 2023 when we had 3.6 million customers, which stood at 381 million euros. So that at the end of the business plan period, we will be at 607 million euros in terms of EBITDA, with a 4% structural growth, which begins on the evolution of the commodity margin, especially linked to a reduction in overall margins, linked to the normalization of certain trading margins, and others linked to structured customers we have, which during the energy crisis were very satisfactory. Although with the normalization of prices and market oscillation, these will be reduced. Also, given the effects of competition, we also have a major contribution from the free market, also linked to the transformation of SDG customers. Plus, we also expect to obtain a good contribution from customers thanks to our value-added services. Currently, they represent 7% of our customer base, and we expect that percentage to grow to 17% at the end of the business plan period. Plus, we also have activity regarding public lighting points, and we also have a contribution from an M&A, which brings us to the grand total of 607. So again, we have a number of drivers that can support this structural growth of ours. Even when it comes to generation, we expect to have a positive contribution here, given the investments we're making on renewables, with a close focus on securing cash flows with sales directly to customers, which means that we can build plants and then give them the plants, or through assets we own, which will then supply energy to customers that we have already identified and signed contracts with. Let me now hand it over to our CEO for an overview on networks and waste. Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon. We are here to give you a briefing on our future activities. Let me begin with waste. Waste has an exciting story. We are leaders on the market. We have planned a number of actions that will allow us to have even greater returns for our shareholders with new solutions and new paths ahead. The waste treatment market is worth some 80 million tons per year, both for urban and industrial waste. We are the largest Italian player with a 10% market share. We are fully integrated. The fact that we are leaders, despite only having 10% of the market share, shows how fragmented the market is. There is a significant shortage in capacity, and we wish to consolidate our presence even in mediation activities, even with foreign countries. We want to focus on treating the material with the highest value added in our plants, but we also want to have increasingly a large visibility on flows and on prices for the main European markets. Now, this slide shows you how we are implementing our strategy. We want to continue expanding in our core segments, including treatment, recycling, and soil remediation. We expect to significantly expand our B2B activities, which will be accompanied by a significant return on invested capital, thanks to greater efficiency, economies of scale, consolidation, and expanding our intermediation activities. This growth will be supported by four levers. The first driver is the organic development of our asset capacity. The second driver is the development of partnerships with foreign players. The third driver is the development of external lines, and the fourth is an increasingly visible contribution to the increase of margins stemming from our global waste management services. Now, Let's focus on the individual businesses, beginning with treatment. We hold a 10% market share, which means that we have plenty of room for growth. In this case, we are working to expand our assets. We have invested on the fourth line in Padua, which is the largest investment on waste-to-energy plants in Italy. This is an investment worth 130 million euros. And we also have the waste-to-energy plants in Montale, Tuscany, which is a new element in this business plan. We are now managing that plant, and we will continue to invest in it to improve its efficiency and its profitability. We are developing infrastructure on treatment, including waste energy plants. This will allow us to increase our treatment capacity by 800,000 tons per year. To that, we also have to add a further expansion worth 400,000 tons per year that will stem from our intermediation activity. And this is something we're doing to meet the demands from our customers and partners, including Eni and Fincantieri. In 2026, as you already saw, we have already started using the lever through external lines. We will be becoming a leader in water treatment. And in this waste segment, we are seeing a significant growth in demand, beginning with our industrial partners, and it will continue to grow due to two reasons. First of all, the increasingly stringent directives and legislation, plus the water shortage, which will continue to increase, and therefore we will have to invest to save water, to reuse water, and to treat it. This is yet another element which is important and strategic, which we are adding to our vertical integration plan, which is what we did also with the ACR company for soil remediation, which, as you know, is continuing to give us some very satisfying results. Moving on to recycling. In this case, we are leaders with a 20% market share. This is a market with macro trends which are supported by the PPWR and SUP directives, which are increasing the demand for recycled plastic throughout the industry, for packaging, for food and beverage, for home personal care. So in this sector, we want to increase our asset base for low-density plastic. We also want to develop a new plant for rigid plastic. Plus, we want to make sure that our carbon fiber plant continues to work, with which we're creating a new market. So besides the increase of our productive capacity to intercept this increase in demand, we're also working on diversifying products while still maintaining a foothold in the high-quality sector, which makes us attractive to our customers. And our customers continue to be the very top customers. So we will continue to focus very much on our European customers, which are more keen on a very careful circular management of waste. And in Europe, in fact, we are the second player in terms of turnover amongst the multi-polymer integrated players. And as far as this business is concerned, let me also add that we expect to grow externally by using our branch in Poland, also thanks to new projects that will allow us to intercept the increase in demand for recycled plastic in that country. And finally, the third axis is soil remediation. Even here, we have a good leadership, which is growing very much thanks to the synergies that we were able to extract by integrating the ACR company I mentioned earlier, and which will continue to support the growth of soil remediation as a business and the increase in the volumes of soil treated. Recently, in fact, the European Union has launched a strategy to regenerate soil with a goal to neutralize soil degradation by 2050. Environmental remediation is an essential tool to implement this strategy. The Ministry for the Environment has identified a number of sites which are in the national interest. 13,000 such sites have already been mapped for a total remediation value worth 5 billion euros in terms of turnover. Now, we wish to intercept this growth potential by supporting activities through major development of our plants, not just through organic growth, but also through M&A transactions. I'm sure you're aware of the Girotto acquisition, which allows us to have robots and machines allowing us to be more efficient. To that, we also have to add the organic investments we're making, such as our new soil washing plant. So this is the strategy that we expect to implement to increase our market share by leveraging on our leadership, and we'll see now how the strategy will create value. On the slide here, you can see the economic contribution of the strategy I mentioned. We have a structural growth with an 8% EBITDA growth. And if we compare that figure to 2024, which benefited from profits stemming from the sale of energy based on contracts with energy prices which still hadn't been normalized. And as you can see, the first column is worth some 35 million. This growth is supported by a number of drivers, and it is also supported by the major investments Christian mentioned, which are included in this business plan. If we only count development capex for this business, we're talking about 800 million euros. Our target EBITDA at the end of the business plan period is equal to 481 million, which is supported by a major increase in volumes. And I'm referring to the special waste volumes, which of course drive the growth, and they will go up to 4.6 million tons with an almost 7% progression. We also have an increase in the recycled plastic volume, equal to almost 150%. We also have the volumes generated by remediation. And as you can see from the graph, growth is also supported by our external growth, which was reached, 50% of which was reached by the Sostelia transaction, which was closed 2 days ago. And we will continue to use this lever whenever the targets we appreciate have become available, targets from which we can then extract value. So when it comes to waste, this business plan is increasing our growth targets. It is marked by a limited risk profile because, as you can see from the slide here, we are diversified with plenty of drivers, and therefore these goals are supported by our competitive advantage, which are solid in a market which, as I was mentioning earlier, is still very short. Moving on to networks. To us, networks are essential in our portfolio. And over the upcoming 5-year period, when it comes to networks, we will be working on 4 axes, including the energy transition that our chairman already mentioned. We'll be focusing on efficiency, We'll be focusing on resilience, and all of this will be done through an intense use of innovation so that we can increase advanced levels of efficiency and security with a very broad use of artificial intelligence. Now, in order to be more efficient, this strategy is also based on what we refer to as the extended model. In other words, we want to use our decision centers on our various territories, including customers and authorities, with the goal of creating development and value in a very visible amount of time. Now, the strategy that I announced will lead to a growth in all regulated businesses with a special contribution stemming from water. The first column in the graph, which is worth over 50% of the entire growth. Our water business, of course, is the queen of our networks. Also, if you take into account the macro trends we mentioned earlier, these assets are strategic because the context we operate is marked by increasing water shortages. We also have a very high demand from the industry. The water will be increasingly less available due to climate change, and therefore our strategy is based on an approach that can allow us to develop an industrial model, an extended model, a circular model, which is efficient, safe, and innovative. And this strategy requires a major amount of investments, which underpin the growth of our EBITDA with an increase in our RAB worth 700 million euros. And we are convinced that this growth will continue even beyond 2029, and it will be accompanied by a constant increase in efficiency that we have grown used to, so that we can continue guaranteeing the premiums from the regulator. The second column in the graph shows the contribution of gas networks, which is worth 35 million. Even here, this is supported by a RAB increase worth 300 million. Even here, we have an extended, sustainable, efficient, and innovative model. Nowadays, electricity produced by the gas molecule is still much larger than the electricity produced through electrons, and it will continue to be this way for many years. In Italy, on the distribution networks, electrons will match gas molecules only beginning in 2030. That's why we need to have networks which are safe, adaptable to the energy transition, so that they can host green gases. So in a nutshell, this is a sector which still requires plenty of capex. As we wait for the TOTEX, which we expect to have beginning in 2028 for the gas networks, but already since 2025, and we will continue to cover operative costs all the way up to 2027. This is something that ARERA has guaranteed to the major players in the sector. So this is a plus that we can benefit from following the TAR ruling pertaining to the 570 law for 2019. Moving on to electricity distribution. In this case, we have a smaller contribution, obviously, also given the size of our business compared to others. Over the past 3 years in electricity, we have invested very well and very much, all the way to 170 million per pod, compared to a market average of 100. So we are solid, we're efficient. We are able to meet the increased demand for electrification. The business plan envisages a similar type of investment, which is required by the electrification of consumptions phenomenon and by distributed generation. Besides investments, we also have major contributions from the regulator, which has already introduced the TOTEX system in 2024, and which recently also confirmed the WACC for the regulatory period. As far as this business is concerned, let me also mention the contribution stemming from M&A. which we expect to be 20 million, which is external growth. And even this business plan confirms the fact that we wish to continue consolidating the sector, which is still extremely fragmented, beginning with the water sector. If we look to the highlights on the graph, the growth stems from efficiency, not just investments. We also want to reduce losses. We will be using up to 15% of the water resources that we manage. So that's water reuse. We also will be using technology for the implementation of our predictive maintenance model to the entire group network so that we can be efficient at very high levels for all of the group's assets. And then finally, as a way to safeguard our investment assets, which is worth 1.5 billion on our gas assets, I also think it's worth mentioning that we are the very first in the sector to have experimented gas distribution with a 10% hydrogen blend, which has been recognized by the Ministry for the Environment, Safety and the Environment, which means that our network is pretty much ready to host green gases. And therefore, regardless of how quickly these gases will develop, we are already leading thanks to our asset readiness project, which means that our network will be ready to take in these green gases. Moving on to the final slide, we've already seen what the growth drivers are. This is the CapEx plan, which is worth 170% of the cash flow generated by the business itself. And we expect to reinvest even the liberalized part of the portfolio. As Christian said earlier, this will allow us to concentrate 60% of the group's CapEx on networks, thereby promoting an increase of RAB up to 30%, all the way up to 4.7 billion euros. You can see the distribution of the RAB businesses. Most of it is in water, which will be up to 2.6 billion, which is plus 700 million. The regulated return that we have factored in is shown at the bottom of the slide, and you'll see that the figures are stable for all of the years, also given the recent ARERA decision. So as you can see, we have a very resilient asset base vis-a-vis the macro variable component. And they continue to be at the very core of our business with very high value, with good returns and with a low risk profile, and with a positive impact on the economic and financial profile of the entire group. Thank you very much. And I will give the floor back to the chairman for some conclusions. We went over the 2025 results, which are solid, which will allow us to continue on our structural growth path and to reduce the growth stemming from temporary opportunities. Our financial leverage profile is one marked by a debt to EBITDA ratio equal to 2.6 times, both at the beginning and at the end of the business plan. The structural TSR stands at around 10%. We have a new dividend policy, and we also have the financial flexibility to look at any new and possible opportunities which still haven't been identified and therefore which haven't been included in the new business plan. So this is our business plan in a nutshell. We invested 1 hour of your time on illustrating it, and now we can open the floor for any questions or comments.
La prima domanda
Good
è
afternoon,
di
Mr.
Javier
Fabri.
Suarez di
Our
Mediobanca.
first question is from Javier Suarez, Mediobanca.
Sì, buonasera a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Buonasera, via.
Avevo
Good afternoon, Javier.
tre domande,
I have
gruppi di domande.
3
La
groups of
prima
questions.
ha da vedere con la struttura
The
finanziaria
first
della
is on the
società.
financial structure of the
Nel
company.
slide numero 15 si
Slide
vede una
15
società che continua a vedere
shows
opportunità
that
per la crescita
there
attraverso
is
M&A,
still
ha
opportunity
perseguito 100
for growth for the company.
milioni di euro di EBITDA
You've
fino al
included
2029 come inserendo queste opportunità che voi
these possibilities for M&A,
definite come visibile,
uh,
ma ancora nel
which you
2029
define as visible.
net debt to EBITDA è a
But in
2,7
2029,
volte, che è un
net debt to EBITDA will
divario
still stand at
significativo
2.6 times, which is a
rispetto per
major
altri
difference
operatori nel
compared
sistema,
to other players
nel settore,
in
di
the
quello che
sector.
voi definite come un leverage massimo
And
non
that is the
accettabile per la società.
maximum
La
acceptable
domanda,
leverage for the company as
a
you define
parte
it.
la strategia di
But besides
avere
the
balance sheet optionality, che sicuramente è
strategy of
condivisibile,
having
e più
an
del
optional balance
discorso
sheet,
di dove vedete queste opportunità,
which I
vedete
agree
il
with,
vostro
but where
business di riferimento
are these
e nel vostro
opportunities?
territorio di riferimento ci
Are
sono
they in
così
your
tante opportunità che è virtuoso, crea un processo virtuoso, mantenere
reference business or your reference
flessibilità finanziaria
territory?
che
Are
comunque
these
praticamente
opportunities there,
è molto
which means that you
significativa.
continue to have this
Dove
major
vedete
financial
voi queste
flexibility?
opportunità, e
So where
soprattutto nel
do
business
these
del
opportunities
waste
lie?
ancora, nel vostro territorio di riferimento,
Is it
e nel
still
business
in the
del
waste
supply
business and in your
per
reference
magari
territory?
qualche target
Is it in the
acquisition?
supply
Vedete
business
la
where you
possibilità di
may
fare più M&A, o
look
state
into some targeted
considerando in queste
acquisitions?
balance sheet
Where are
altri
you
tipi
seeing
di
these opportunities
opportunità
for
che
M&A,
non hanno
or
a vedere
are you
con
seeing other
add-on
types of
acquisition
opportunities
nelle vostre
with
attività
this
di
balance sheet,
territorio di
which have
riferimento?
nothing to do
Questo mi
with
interessa perché secondo
acquisitions
me è importante per capire
or
la
in
logica
your
con cui è stata
reference
costruita il business plan.
businesses or your local territories?
La
Just
seconda domanda
to
è sul
understand
il
how you
mondo
built
del
the business
supply.
plan. The second
Il
question is
business
on the
plan,
supply sector.
ovviamente ci sarà un'assunzione su quello che
The
succede dal
business plan is based
2027
on
in
an
poi,
assumption
con il cliente che
on what
avete
will be happening
acquisito
beginning in
nel
2027
cliente elettrici, no?
with
A
the
un certo punto
electricity
andranno sul
customers you
mercato
acquired.
libero,
At
e
one point, they will be
questo
going to the liberalized
significherà
market.
un incremento della
This will
redditività di
mean that there
questi
will be an
clienti
increase
stessi,
in the
no?
profitability of
Quindi
these same customers.
è corretto dire che il vostro
Is
business
it
plan
safe to say that
vede
your
questa
that
accelerazione del
business plan
bottom line
envisages
nella
a
seconda
speeding
metà
up of the
dell'anno,
bottom line in the
soprattutto
second
collegate
part
al
of the year,
business supply con questa dinamica? E
especially
che
linked
altre
to
dinamiche
the
dobbiamo
supply
considerare
business with this
riferente al supply
dynamic?
business
Or what
per
other
business plan?
dynamics should we be
Il
looking at
terzo gruppo
in the
di
supply
domande con
business?
rispetto a
And the
mi interessava avere un
next group of
update
questions
strategico
uh,
della
is on
acquisizione
a
recente
strategic
di
update regarding the
Sostelia,
recent acquisition you
quale
made
è
of
il motivo
Sostelia.
strategico perché
What is the strategic
quale avete
reasoning
comprato
behind the
questa
acquisition,
società che opera nel water treatment, e come
which operates in the water
francamente
treatment sector,
l'acquisizione di questa società potrebbe essere
and
virtuosa
how
per
the
estrarsi
acquisition of this
servizi,
company
aumentare e
can be
efficientare
good
le vostre
in terms
attività,
of extracting
fare prefer business
synergies
way,
and
eccetera,
increasing
eccetera.
the
Mi interessa
efficiency
sapere
of
dove
your
l'operazione AIMA
business.
in questo momento si vedete la
Uh,
possibilità
what about
di
the IMAG transaction?
riprenderla in mano, e
Uh,
l'ultima cosa che mi interessava
do you
è
still have an
se avete
opportunity
fatto
to
qualche assunzione
take control
particolare
of it?
collegata con
And finally,
con il rinnovo
what are
delle
the
concessioni elettriche.
assumptions regarding the
Grazie.
renewal of the electricity concessions? Thank you.
Finisco di scrivere, se no
Let me just
dimentico le ultime domande.
finish taking notes here.
Partiamo
Now,
dalla leverage della struttura finanziaria.
beginning with the
È chiaro
financial
che
structure. Now,
noi in questo momento
clearly,
abbiamo dal punto di vista degli investimenti organici
when it comes to the organic investments,
sicuramente ulteriori spazi per far crescere gli
we still
investimenti
have further
organici nei
room to
settori regolati.
increase organic
Perché?
investments in the
Come
regulated
dicevo,
sectors because,
noi
as I was saying,
abbiamo opportunità un po' in tutte le fasi
we have
del
opportunities
ciclo,
in all
della parte del ciclo idrico, se vogliamo,
phases of the
partendo
water
da
cycle,
che sono legate alla parte di disponibilità di acqua, di securitizzazione della
beginning with
disponibilità di acqua. Qui
the
noi
availability of water and
già abbiamo
securitizing
previsto una serie di iniziative che
the availability of water.
aumentano la
And
capacità
in the plan, we've
disponibile
also
e
envisaged a number of initiatives to
interconettono
increase the amount available,
diverse fonti di approvvigionamento
which
proprio per
connects
creare una
various
struttura molto più
procurement
resiliente
sources
in maniera da
so we can create a more
garantire
resilient
una
structure
disponibilità
which in turns guarantees the availability for all parts of the network so that we can have an in-pool procurement for the local networks. We have to invest on water distribution in a major way so that we can reduce network leakages. In terms of linear leakages, and linear leakages measure the quality of the network because leakages in percentage don't take into account the density of customers. In other words, how many kilometers of networks we have for customers. Whereas when we measure linear leakages, what we see is that we are less than half of the Italian average. We're in line with the European average, and we still continue to invest. When it comes to the sewage and purification system, we have a certain number of territories in which we are reviewing the sewage systems to take into account the greater intensity of rainfall, especially in those areas in which we have mixed sewage systems, which means that not only do they serve our water customer sewage systems, but they also collect rainfall, which means that we have to redesign and redefine a system which in some places dates back to the Middle Ages, which means that we have plenty of space for further investments. All the way up to purification. Even here, the very stringent legislation, which go beyond the business plan period, but which still requires plenty of investments. So again, we have plenty of space for organic investments, which we are speeding up, but we can still do more. Also, when it comes to networks, Orazio mentioned our electricity networks, in which we are working on enhancing the network, and we have plenty of room to do that. And when it comes to gas distribution, we currently have the need to invest in renewing our infrastructure. In 2040, this infrastructure will still continue to cover 30% of our end customers' needs. Obviously, therefore, the infrastructure needs to be kept efficient, safe, and it needs to be enhanced technologically. So in this sector, we still have plenty of room for major organic investment. When it comes to growth through external lines, well, the sectors that we have the most files on is waste. And just recently, we completed the acquisition of the Sostelia company. The whole process will be completed by the end of March, and its contribution covers already 20% of what we've included in the business plan. But again, we have plenty of files that we're looking at, and the challenge here is to find a target which has the right price vis-a-vis the value we give to that target and what our expectations are regarding that business. And again, there are plenty of files. We are very selective, but there is a lot of excitement. And similarly, when it comes to energy supply and energy efficiency, we are striving for consolidation in a sector with plenty of players, and it is a sector with challenges which will because even there, something seems to be changing, although very slowly and less intensely. So these are all the elements that we're looking at closely. the size of these transactions may be smaller or larger, but that's the direction that we are continuing to head in. Again, going back to the Sostelia example, the Sostelia transaction is one that has many value creation opportunities from many different points of view, beginning with the water treatment business. The water can be polluted either by the industry or by the integrated cycle. And in this context, we will be facing increasingly stringent legislation requiring major investments, and that is a sector which will require very high levels of management capabilities, which means that in this case, we can create synergies both in the waste sector and in the integrated water cycle. So this is a strategy we have, and this is the visibility we're sharing with you in terms of how we're looking at the files we have. Also, given the fact that the sectors we operate in are still very fragmented and with plenty of opportunities for further consolidation. Again, in the waste business, we are the market leaders and we only have a 10% market share. That is proof of the fact there is plenty of space for further consolidation. When it comes to energy supply, we have plenty of different types of phenomena which intersect and which have different ways of developing throughout the business plan period. We're seeing a normalization on margins in certain customer segments. That will lead to an overall reduction of the margin. Then we have the evolution of the margin with STG customers moving to the liberalized market, which is linked to the market margins. Many customers are already preferring initiatives and solutions which are focused on decarbonization, or they're also looking at fixed prices given the major external uncertainties, and those aren't guaranteed to SDG customers. So we're waiting for 2028 when that shift will happen. Then we have the normalization of the last resort market, which will continue throughout 2026. And that certainly has a negative trend. And then we have a progressive growth stemming from production and decarbonization services for customers. So these are the macro trends and moving parts we're seeing regarding the margin drivers in energy supply. We also have other items which seem to be moving, linked to adjustments in margins and other fine-tuning linked to the settlement sector, which we will continue to work on throughout the business plan period. Moving on to IMAG. Currently, the public shareholders are trying to understand what needs to be done to deal with all the open questions regarding the company's future. So basically, they're brainstorming to try to find a solution and give a future to the company. Regarding all of that, we will simply have to see what the timeline and the way to operate will be in the future. Now, the reasons which led to the agreement last year are still very reasonable, and we just have to find the right way forward, which is satisfactory and fully compliant. As far as the renewal of concessions is concerned, we are in a condition of continuity everywhere because there are no conditions for tenders anywhere, even as far as electricity is concerned. We have included remunerated investments included in the RAB, given the effect of the renewal of concessions. We're waiting to see what the regulatory news will be. So basically, we're in a condition of continuity. Also taking into account the fact that organizing a tender requires plenty of time. And to date, we have renewed all concessions, either in the waste sector or in the waste collection, wherever there have been tenders, because based on our skills and on the experience so we have, our over 10-year experience, we were reconfirmed in the management of those services. I think I've covered all your questions. Hopefully that answers everything. Of course, Orazio wanted to add something regarding the industrial value of Sostelia. Hello, Javier. You were asking us why we made that acquisition. Well, first of all, because it allows us to tap into Sostelia's technical know-how. They are the only ones on the market, as far as we're concerned, who can design, build, and manage civilian and industrial water treatment assets. And that is related to the cost efficiency efforts we're making. We are looking to subcontractors. We're working with industrial players, and therefore we're able to use their very high-level industrial know-how with a tailor-made service. And this is a very high competitive advantage for us because, again, they are the only company which is fully integrated in designing, building, and managing. They are a full-service company. And as Christian was saying, this gives us a further competitive advantage stemming from the synergies stemming from our industrial customer portfolio, simply by matching our databases, which means that we can sell services to Sostelia customers, the ones we already offer to our industrial customers, and vice versa. Our industrial customers will be able to take advantage of Sostelia's services. So this is the cross-selling approach, which will certainly give us major synergies, similarly to what the ACR company has given us in the remediation sector. So this is a vertical integration which I'm sure will lead to a major growth in margins. That's very interesting. Thank you. The next question is by Emanuele Oggioni, Kepler Cheuvreux. Emanuele, over to you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation. I also have a few questions for you. The first is on the retail business. The 4.5 million customers at the end of the business plan are the same number you had in the previous business plan, except it moved a year forward. Although the EBITDA of the previous business plan to 2028 was at around 586 million euros EBITDA, whereas in 2029 it is above 600 million. And based on what you've already commented, basically in the business plan period, you don't expect a general competitive pressure or a reduction in customer margins, something which other players mentioned in previous conference calls and in previous quarters, although not in a very transparent way. And there's the risk of further competitive pressure thanks to incoming players and the move of customers from one company to another. But based on your numbers, it would seem that given the same number of customers, you have a better mix and you're improving the absolute value of EBITDA throughout the business plan period. So that was my first question on retail. The second question is on waste. And then I have a third question of networks. But second question on waste, even here we're seeing a growth in CapEx from 1.1 billion in the previous business plan to 1.2 billion, which means that you have an extra 100 million euros in terms of CapEx, with an EBITDA which is flat for the most part, because at the end of the previous business plan it stood at 470 million euros EBITDA, whereas in 2029 we stand at 480 million. In your excellent slide on the return on invested capital,
waste treatment e anche il waste collection mi sembra che abbiano dei ritorni
waste treatment and waste collection have returns which are in line, if not slightly above, the ones you had in 2028, which was the previous target, the previous business plan target to 2028. So apparently, on the one hand, there was a higher return on invested capital, but on the other, in 2029, the EBITDA appeared to be flat compared to the previous business plan version, compared to a higher CapEx. And then a third question on water. And the concept here is similar to what I already said for waste. Even here, we have an increase in CapEx, although the RAB stays flat. It's a rounded figure to 2.6 billion euros at the end of the business plan period, which is what it was in the previous business plan. And it also has a flat EBITDA, roughly at around 360 million euros in the old business plan to 2028. And it's similar in the new business plan. If I remember correctly, this can be partly explained by the different consolidation perimeter. In the previous business plan, you included IMAG, which had a major share in networks and water, whereas now IMAG is no longer considered. So basically, there's a different perimeter you're considering when it's actually a different mix. And then one final question for the short term, for 2026. Can you give us some moving parts? I know you don't share figures, numbers, but I just wanted to know what the main moving parts are in terms of EBITDA by division compared to 2025. And then can you give us an update on the net profit year on year? Is it in line with the business plan trend, equal to 6% or not? Thank you.
Grazie per le domande.
Thank you for the questions.
Rispondo, diciamo, in ordine, cercando di ricostruire
Let me try to answer all your questions and to compare it with this business plan with the old one. Now, energy supply, there is competition. In the past, our growth targets and our growth results allow us to grow our customer base consistently
quest'anno abbiamo considerato
whereas this year
una situazione ma in linea con quella che avevamo visto anche
we
l'anno scorso,
considered a
quella di
solution which was
stabilità
in line with what we
della
had last
customer
year,
base,
meaning that our
che
customer
è un po'
base is
flessibile.
stable.
Perché
That's the challenge we
aumenta,
face.
rispetto all'anno scorso con un anno in più la parte del
Now,
contributo complessivo
why
del business,
is the overall
per
business contribution up
due
in this business
titoli
plan compared to the last version of the business plan? Well, two things. The two most important things are,
su tutto il mondo
first of all, that the goal we've given ourselves
e anche legati alla
is
crescita
linked to the increase in value-added services,
delle rinnovabili in questo
and we
momento
also
in
expect to
avvio
increase
qualche milione in più.
renewables with a few extra million
Perché dico questo? Che l'anno
with
scorso
this model.
eravamo ancora
I'm saying this
in
because last
uscita,
year
diciamo, del super ecobonus con
we
una
were still
visibilità
seeing the last effects of the super
per
eco
impostare
bonus,
le attività,
and we had the need to basically reset all of our activities.
proprio prudente su questo
So
asse,
we were a lot more
che
cautious in this
per una
regard.
serie di iniziative che stiamo diciamo, che abbiamo concluso in alcuni
And
casi,
with a few
che
initiatives,
stiamo
some of which have
concludendo su altri
already been
casi, vediamo
concluded,
l'opportunità
others
di
are
fare
being concluded.
investimenti sul tema
We're
dell'efficienza
seeing the
energetica con
opportunity of
contratti
investing on energy
pluriennali che
efficiency with multi-year contracts, which then
anche la gestione e anche rispetto a
guarantee
questo una
that
opportunità
we
di
can
sviluppo sulla parte
manage the
dell'illuminazione
business.
pubblica, dove
We can
stiamo
also
continuando a
develop
far crescere
the business in
l'arco
public lighting, where we are
dei punti luce servizi e serviti progressivamente.
increasing the
Questi sono
public
sicuramente i
lighting
titoli.
points
L'anno scorso avevamo
that
dato
we
una
serve
formula
progressively.
al contributo
Uh,
all'M&A per business che
so
che teneva
last year,
conto, diciamo, del
our
profilo
M&A per
di
business
IMAG come
did take the
business,
IMAG profile
una parte più
into account
significativa,
in the
e
mix
questo ha comportato un
with a
contributo più
higher
basso sulla
percentage.
parte dell'energy supply e un contributo più
That led to
alto
a lower
anche
contribution in terms of
sulla
energy
parte delle
supply
reti
and a higher
come
contribution
elemento
in
di
terms of
impatto
networks,
sull'EBITDA, ma lasciami dire
uh,
anche complessivamente
in terms of the impact on
sulla,
EBITDA,
sulla parte
but also
RAB, no?
more in general on RAB.
Cerco di leggere diciamo, e di riprendere i numeri che hai toccato. Noi l'anno scorso
Let me just try to go back to the numbers you mentioned. Last year, with IMAG's contribution,
di 4 milioni e mezzo
we had a RAB worth
finale,
4.5 billion.
abbiamo una RAB
This year,
consolidata di 4,7.
our consolidated
Questo
RAB is
frutto della
4.7,
sostituzione
which stems
parte
from
di RAB che arrivava da
having
IMAG con
replaced
il
the
piano investimenti
IMAG RAB part
nuovo che
with the new
implementa
investment plan,
la crescita
which
della
implements
RAB
the growth
complessiva
of the
sulla
overall RAB.
parte dei numeri totali. Sulla parte, diciamo,
On the total
della
numbers.
crescita dell'EBITDA sul mondo
Regarding
reti,
the
comunque
EBITDA
qui
growth in
abbiamo
networks,
una crescita diciamo visibile
we have a
rispetto
visible
al
growth
risultato che avevamo visto l'anno
compared
scorso,
to the figure we had seen last year,
17-18 milioni di euro,
equal to
con
17 or 18 million
bassi.
euros
Quindi
with a
qui
lower
lo
M&A
vediamo
contribution.
in maniera chiara.
And we can see
Sul
that very
mondo del
clearly.
waste, questo lo dico, poi lascio
In
a
the
Orazio
waste
intervenire
business,
sulla parte del
let me
waste
just say
in
something
termini
before I
di
give the floor to
cambio di
Orazio.
mix e di attività che abbiamo inserito nel piano industriale. Anche qui abbiamo una crescita
As far as the business plan is concerned, we have a
rispetto
growth
a quello del
in the contribution to 2029 compared to 2028,
sulla parte di investimenti,
generally
adesso al di là
speaking.
dei rounding,
And
siamo
as far as investments are
livelli
concerned, besides
più
the
o meno
fact that
allineati, nel
the
senso
numbers
che
are a little bit rounded up or
quest'anno
down,
abbiamo inserito
over the 5-year period,
sulla
we're
parte,
pretty much in line.
se vado a pagina,
Um,
aspettate che sto sfogliando.
I'm trying to find the right page.
Hai fatto domande che entrano sulla prima cifra dopo la virgola, quindi
Your questions
provo a leggerli in
are very
trasparenza.
specific on
L'anno
figures, so
scorso
I'm trying to give
avevamo
you the
sulla
right
parte di
ones.
development
Last
capex
year,
e
on
M&A
development capex and M&A,
investimenti per 1 miliardo e
our investments were worth 1.2 billion.
siamo un po' più alti, 1 miliardo
This year, we're a little higher than that, 1.4 billion. But compared to last year's figures, which are pretty much the same, we also have to consider that As far as development capex is concerned, we also included the M&A debt, which means that when we consider M&A, we have the value of the cash used, which is higher for an extra 150 to 160 million, and that justifies the difference you saw in terms of cash. These are the macro numbers on decimals, and then of course the numbers which change after the second dot after the billion. So it's a few dozen million, which aren't anything major compared to the overall changes in the numbers. If we then look to the final contribution, Orazio, I'm sure, will mention the fact that we also have a small contribution linked to the sale of energy produced, which is lower than what we had expected in last year's scenario, with a slightly lower contribution as far as this item is concerned. Let me just add something on networks. And by the way, good afternoon, Emanuele. As far as networks, in 2023, which is what the previous business plan was based on, we didn't have the electricity ROS, which then appeared in 2024, which adds to all the things Christian was saying earlier. And then we also have to consider that between 2023 and 2024, we also had the WACC update worth 80 to 90 bips for electricity and gas, and it was worth 130 bips for water. So we have the topic of the electricity ROS, which only arrived in 2024. So the beginning was slightly different. As far as waste is concerned, there is a reference to the electricity margin, the electricity generated by waste energy plants, which is something that we have to take into account. And we have made forecasts which are slightly more conservative for the next few years in this business plan compared to the previous business plan. If we then look at the structural CAGR in waste, it's basically 8%, which is 1 point more compared to last year's, although the net numbers and the energy margin is the one which stems from the different fixing values we use when we set the energy value, along with the hedging policies we implement every year. We gave you a quick answer on these very specific numbers, but then of course with Jens's office, I'm sure you can get all the details. As you know, the size of these phenomena we're talking about is worth a few million. So with this quick answer, we just gave you the overall flavor, but then I'm sure that Jens can give you all of the more accurate numbers. Thank you. And there was one final question on 2026. Of course, I had ignored it on purpose. I was so focused on giving you the answers on all the numbers you asked about. So I subconsciously forgot that last question. Well, as you know, we don't give any guidance, but what we're seeing in 2026 compared to 2025 is that we have the further normalization of the contribution linked to the last instance markets, which will be normalized from 2026 onward. We have some contribution stemming from the tariff increase, which was a one-off in 2025, which allowed us to grow in 2025. Then, of course, we're also seeing the evolution in organic growth, which is going in the opposite direction compared to the previous thing I mentioned. So there are a few elements that we're working on for 2026, and we're trying to do a good job on the dynamics we're seeing.
Grazie.
Thank you.
La prossima domanda
The next question
è di Roberto
is
Letizia
by
di
Roberto
Equita
Letizia,
Sim.
Equita Sim.
Prego, Roberto.
Sì, buon pomeriggio, grazie mille per la
Good
presentazione.
afternoon. Thank you very
Io
much for the
volevo ritornare
presentation.
sul tema delle opzionalità
I'd like to go
aggiuntive
back
e
to
in
the
particolare focalizzarmi
extra
sul
options, and I'd like to
re-leverage.
focus on the
Diciamo, voi avete
re-leverage.
un piano che appunto, come diceva Javier precedentemente, ha
As
una cifra che
Javier was
porta
saying earlier,
sicuramente il debito, ma io credo che
you
la società
have a
possa in
net debt
queste
to EBITDA
condizioni di
ratio equal to
mercato
2.6
sostenere
times. But I think
interamente
that the
almeno
company, given the current
1,8
market conditions,
e addirittura
can
superando
stand
questo ratio
3
anche
times
soltanto magari in
debt
maniera
to EBITDA ratio,
casuale.
and you can
Questo
even
lascia
go
allo
above
spazio
that
di bilancio
temporarily, which
di
means that
dare
you have,
800 milioni di euro, escludendo
I'd say,
l'eventuale di ibridi che
800
magari
million
non
euros,
avete e quindi e che poi eventualmente potrebbero anche essere utilizzati
except
per aumentare la
without even
disponibilità
going
di
into
liquidità. E
any
questo, assumendo
extra
multipli
leverage you can
ragionevoli
use.
come riferimento di mercato,
And
vale
with reasonable
quasi fino al
multiples,
10%
I
dell'EBITDA
think that's worth up to 10% of
potenzialmente.
EBITDA,
Però non lo
potentially.
vediamo nel piano e quindi io
But we're not seeing this in
volevo
the business
capire
plan.
un po'
So I
qualitativamente,
just
ma
wanted
anche
to
a
understand,
sensazione da uomo di mercato, ecco, diciamola così, qual è la probabilità di vedere
I'd just like
questo
to get an idea
potenziale
of
di bilancio
how
speso
likely it
in arco
is
piano
for you to spend
e cos'è che in questo
that
momento
potential throughout the
blocca
business plan
spavori?
period,
Perché non riusciamo a vederlo?
and
Vediamo
why
soltanto questi 100 milioni di euro di cui
aren't we
insomma
seeing
20 milioni li avete
all that
buttati a
amount?
casa e il
We're
run
only seeing 100
rate degli anni
million.
precedenti
20
è
million you've
superiore,
already
quindi diciamo
spent,
anche solo
whereas the
ipotizzando
run rate we
un'operazione
had in
piccole
previous
bolt-on,
years
non
was
spendo il
a
potenziale di
lot higher
leverage
than
che
that.
ha la società
So you're not
e realizzo
spending the
100
debt
milioni che sono
potential your
inclusi,
company
quindi in
has.
realtà nel piano noi non lo stiamo vedendo
We're not
questa
seeing
possibilità di rileverage, no? Quindi ecco,
this
la
option to
probabilità di
re-leverage
vederla
in the
nell'arco
business plan. So
piano
how
e
likely is it
cosa la
that we will be
faciliterà
seeing this in the
e
business plan
possiamo
period?
immaginare che
What
se
may
alla fine
lead to
non
you
si
using that
concretizzassero
leverage?
operazioni M&A, la società
And
possa pensare di ritornare agli azionisti, come abbiamo visto fare ad altre società, per
if
cui nel caso in cui non si
we will
concretizzano
not see any M&A,
operazioni di
will
mercato,
you actually
gli possa
consider
ritornare nello spazio di
turning to the
bilancio agli
shareholder
azionisti con una politica più generosa o con
with a
delle
more
politiche
generous dividend
agevolative.
policy or with a buyback
Un
policy?
po' più nello specifico volevo capire,
And then more specifically,
parlando degli elementi delle contingency che eventualmente sono state inserite a piano, no?
referring to the
Però i prezzi
contingencies you may have included in
dell'energia
the
con
business
uno
plan, and we
scenario
talked about
assolutamente
the energy
ragionevole,
prices
c'è
with a very
una
reasonable
decrescita dei
scenario.
clienti dell'STG, in
There has
particolare
been a decrease in STG customers.
cosa
And
sottende, perché
regarding
c'è questa
STG,
assunzione di
why do you have
perdite
this
clienti,
assumption that you
considerando
will be
l'andamento del
losing customers?
2025. Per
If
cui il
we
commento vostro
consider
sarebbe
the trend we saw in
stato
2025,
una maggiore soddisfazione, no? Nel turnover
whereas
di
you
questi
always said
clienti
that you were very
all'interno e quindi
satisfied
di
with
fatto di un
this,
andamento
the
migliore
turnover
rispetto
these
alle
customers had on the
previsioni, per
market,
cui
which is
sono
better
parte
than
di quei
your
clienti
initial
saranno poi chiaramente
expectations.
migrati
And only part of those customers
al mercato libero. Poi due domande un po' più specifiche,
would only
invece
move
volevo sapere
to
quanti
the liberalized
megawatt
market.
nello
Okay, and then
sviluppo
specifically,
solar
how
sono
many
da destinati a
megawatts in your solar
particolari aziende.
development
E
are destined to third parties?
ecco questa diciamo la domanda un po' più tecnica e poi il resto direi che
That's
lo
a more
approfondiremo più
technical
tardi. Grazie,
question.
grazie mille.
Thank you very much.
Allora, parto in ordine inverso rispetto
Let me begin with your last
all'istruzione
question.
delle domande. Allora, primo punto, megawatt sulla parte,
The question on
diretta ai clienti, in realtà quasi tutti.
the megawatts going to directly to customers. Well,
Quanti megawatt vanno a finire
it's almost entirely
capitale investito, di cui
for customers.
circa la metà, no? Circa 200.
Some 200 out of the total 370 megawatts are the ones that we will be financing with our own resources. The remaining part will be development we'll be doing together with customers.
o se no la solo vendita dell'iniziativa in una logica di decarbonizzazione.
Or we can just simply sell the initiative with a decarbonization approach, and we'll consolidate the customer in the future. So that's a summary in terms of size.
Di questa parte, diciamo di circa 200 megawatt, una parte consistente
And
è fatta
the 200 megawatts,
servizio di clienti che
most of those 200 megawatts
contrattualizzeranno nel lungo
are
periodo
used to serve those customers who will have long-term contracts for energy.
diversi contratti
So we already have a number of contracts which are up and running,
con lo sviluppo impiantistico.
and they go hand in hand with the development of our plants.
Anche diciamo di agrivoltaico destinate ai clienti.
Keep in mind that we are also developing some photovoltaic initiative with certain customers with low solar consumption. So we're trying to basically fine-tune the opportunities we're seeing locally.
Poi sull'STG, noi avevamo fatto
Then
un'ipotesi
you had a question on SDG.
un numero maggiore di clienti, quindi diciamo le ipotesi che stiamo facendo sono in linea
We were forecasting a higher loss of customers. So our forecasts are in line with the expectations that we
rispetto ai passaggi che
had mentioned during 2025.
Nel ragionamento. Considerate che queste sono comunque aspettative
And please consider that these are expectations that
degli anni successivi. Oggi vediamo che questi clienti
also consider the next few years. What we're seeing now is that these customers have a churn rate which is lower compared to the market average.
Più che soddisfatti dell'investimento fatto e abbiamo ridotto
So we are
il quantitativo di clienti
more than satisfied with the investment we've made
uscita rispetto alle ipotesi iniziali che avevamo
and with
messo nel
the
business plan.
churn rate for the customers
La parte,
compared to
diciamo, di
the
investimento sul
business plan hypothesis.
di utilizzo e stretching della leva finanziaria.
Then you had a question on how we will use our financial lever.
Rispondendo alla domanda di Javier,
I tried to already answer the question on leverage
provo a dirlo in maniera molto più esplicita.
when I answered a question
Oggi
Javier had made.
abbiamo sicuramente spazio
Let me be a little bit more explicit.
crescere anche più rapidamente la
We
parte
certainly have room to grow even quicker
e questo è sicuramente un
when it
utilizzo
comes to the organic part of the investment.
della cassa disponibile.
And that's certainly
Abbiamo inserita nel piano
one way of using the cash we have available.
mantenere un po' di
We
flessibilità
didn't include it in the business plan because we wanted to hold on to a certain degree of financial flexibility, but it is an option. If you consider that with this business plan, our level of investment compared to the previous business plan is 250 million euros higher.
Sicuramente una leva che possiamo ancora agire.
And that's something that's a lever we can still use.
Oggi diciamo, abbiamo inserito un quantitativo di M&A che
We included an amount of M&A for the time being,
quasi organica per noi.
the size of which is almost organic to us. What do I mean by that?
Partiamo già con 20 milioni in
It means
tasca,
that we have already completed 20 million of the 100 million we've included in the business plan, and we'll continue to look at the targets to achieve that goal. So we included this number because statistically it's safe. It's statistically guaranteed. This is a number that is feasible and which only depends on our ability to achieve goals. Instead of 100, we could have added an extra 100 M&A, but of course, it really depends on the size of the deals we feel are most interesting. And please consider that during 2025, we worked very intensely on a number of different files with
adeguati
which didn't have
essere portati fino alla firma finale.
the right
Questo lo dico
quality and
perché
price
in
ratio,
realtà ce
and
ne
therefore
sono,
we didn't
noi cerchiamo
finalize
di
those
essere
transactions, which
attenti
goes to show
a
that there are
non
plenty of
prendere
opportunities out there,
opportunità che
but we just want to
sicuramente
be
ci
very
portano alla
careful
crescita temporanea, ma
in
poi non portano quell'estrazione di
choosing the
valore
right
che
transactions.
noi
We don't want to grow in the
come
short term
target
without then
sotto queste
extracting value,
condizioni. Questo è
which is the
la
ultimate goal
sfida
we
che
have.
dobbiamo fare, e in questo momento
That's the challenge we face.
noi potevamo anche inserirli, però è chiaro che
And of course, we could have included
sono
something extra,
numeri che dipendono ovviamente
but
anche
these are
dalla
numbers which
possibilità di successo
obviously also
che ci
depend
sono
on
delle opportunità che passano,
the
perché sono
possibility
veramente
for them to
tendenzialmente
be
più in
successful.
avanti,
And they're also
e
based on the
c'è una
opportunities.
statistica più
Of course,
bassa del numero
if
di
you're looking at
operazioni che
more
possiamo
sizable transactions, of
realizzare,
course,
e
statistically, there's
questo
fewer
è
of
il
them.
motivo per cui
So that's the
non
reason
li abbiamo
why
inseriti, ma
we didn't
abbiamo
include
spazi per poter sicuramente
extra
accelerare
opportunities. But of course,
anche nella parte
we
organica il
do
nostro
have room
investimento e
to speed up
le nostre
our
attività
investments
di crescita. Questo
and
è
our growth opportunities, even organically.
l'approccio che noi teniamo
So that's the
ai
approach we
piani
have
industriali, quello di mettere dentro
with our
iniziative
business plan.
che insomma,
We want to include
sono
initiatives
visibili
which
e tecnicamente
are visible
raggiungibili
and which
in
are
una
technically
modalità
achievable
di execution che possiamo fare. Quindi gli
in terms
investimenti
of our ability
rendono
to
visibili
execute
lo
them.
sviluppo dei mercati,
So our investments are visible.
è visibile e fattibile, e
The
poi tra
development of
le
markets has
sfide
to
che ci
be
poniamo
visible and feasible.
dal punto di vista industriale, ma
It's all part of the
possono
challenges we face from
poterli
the industrial
portare a
standpoint,
casa dipendentemente dalle nostre capacità,
and we have to be able
poterli
to
fare, mettere dentro un altro
conclude
miliardo
them.
di investimenti in M&A in questo momento non dipende solo dalle nostre capacità, ma
But
dipende
currently,
anche
adding an
dalle
extra 1
dimensioni dei
billion
target che
for M&A doesn't only depend on our capacities, it also depends on the
200
targets.
milioni li consideriamo
Whereas the number
fattibili
we've
in base
included,
alla
which is
campagna
100
che abbiamo
million,
sempre detto, come
is a number that we think is
siamo mai
feasible,
sentiti
also
giocatori
based on
grossi. Tu,
our track record,
Emanuele,
as you yourself, Emanuele, were saying.
Grazie mille.
prego.
Thank you very much.
La prossima domanda
The
è
next
di
question
Francesco Sala di
is by
Banca
Francesco
Akros.
Sala, Banca
Prego,
Akros.
Francesco.
Sì, buonasera, grazie per la presentazione, per le
Good afternoon, and
domande.
thank you for the
Io ho una
presentation and
prima
for giving
cosa
us
nel
this opportunity.
retail,
I have a
se
first
ci
question on the
sono
retail market.
differenze apprezzabili, diciamo, tra
Are there any
clienti gas e
significant
clienti
differences
elettrici
between
e
gas and
diciamo, se
electricity
nel
customers?
primo caso le pressioni competitive rimangono più contenute.
And if
La
in the former,
seconda è se possiamo
is
assumere
the competitive
nelle
pressure more
assunzioni del piano
limited?
riguardo l'inflazione del 2% che
The
sia
second
anche
question,
l'inflation da applicare alla RAB
is the 2%
lungo
inflation the
l'arco
inflation that
piano.
also needs to be applied to the
E
RAB
la
throughout the
terza
business plan
è il
period?
leggero aumento del tax
And then
rate che
the third
diciamo
question
volevo
is on the
chiaro
slight increase in the tax
che
rate.
orizzonte temporale avesse,
What
quale
timeline does
fosse
this have?
l'origine, è poco, ma circa un 0,4%. E infine se avete fatto delle
Is it linked to
riflessioni,
the
se avete già delle
0.4% origin?
opportunità
And my fourth
anche a
question
breve e
is,
medio termine di
are there
efficienza
any
legato all'utilizzo
short to medium
dell'AI,
term
soprattutto diciamo
efficiency targets linked
sul
to the
business
use of
retail,
AI
efficienza
for the retail
operativa.
business?
Grazie.
Thank you.
Allora, scusa, per quanto riguarda il tema della pressione competitiva sui mercati,
As far as the competitive pressure we're seeing on the markets
sui segmenti di clienti elettrici e gas, oggi
for gas and
considerate che
electricity
le
customers,
strutture commerciali
you should consider that
operano in una logica di dual fuel, e quindi
currently
la
our commercial structures
la
operate with a
pressione è
dual
uguale.
fuel approach.
Noi
So it's the
abbiamo
same pressure basically.
switchato il portafoglio da un mix
We
prevalentemente gas a un mix
switched our
prevalentemente
portfolio
elettrico,
from a mostly gas
proprio nella
mix to a
logica
mostly
di catturare quel
electricity
valore
mix
che è relativo ai
with the
consumi
idea
dei
of
clienti finali, perché se da un
capturing
lato
the
i
value
clienti
linked to the
gas
consumption of end
per
customers.
effetto del riscaldamento globale
On the one hand,
tendenzialmente hanno un
gas
consumo
customers, due to global
nel medio
warming,
lungo periodo in diminuzione, poi non è
will
che da un anno
decrease their
all'altro la
consumption in the
tendenza sia
medium to long
reversibile il
term.
trend, perché dipende
Uh,
anche dalle fluttuazioni climatiche del
although you
singolo
can't really
anno, però nella
appreciate these
logica di
changes
medio
on
lungo periodo è
from one
stato
year to the next.
switchabile, abbiamo
Although
switchato
in the long
il
term,
portafoglio, e la gara
we did
STG ci
switch
ha
our
permesso
portfolio, and the
di
SDG tender
invertire la dimensione
allowed us to
del
basically
mix
revert
di clienti.
our customer mix.
Quindi da questo punto di vista i clienti elettrici
So from this point of view,
leggero incremento dei consumi a fronte di
we're
quello
seeing a slight increase in consumption in electricity customers compared to a
abbiamo invertito
long-term decrease in gas consumption. That's why we reverted the mix.
Dell'impatto del tax rate.
And then you had a question on the impact of the tax rate, which is slightly up compared to what we had considered in the previous business plan, given the fact that some tax
legati a aumenti di IRAP nelle regioni dove operiamo in maniera prevalente, quindi
subsidies expired, but it's also due to the effect of the IRAP tax in certain regions. Then we have the question on the overall inflation rate. I can't remember exactly what our forecast for the evolution of the RAB is.
Vi risponde Jens.
Well, Jens and Luca can send you the answer after the conference call. I think it's similar, but the indicator level used in the evolution of the RAB changes from the water sector to the gas sector. So the update approach is different, depending on whether or not the year is even or odd. There's some technical issues, and therefore in the various businesses, the figures are never the same. Now, can't remember what the decimals were, but I think it's safe to say that it's roughly 2% for the business plan period. So that's the reference we used, generally speaking. As far as the impact of AI is concerned on the market, what we're testing leads to a visible reduction in costs. For those initiatives in which we implemented technology, think of CRM. We've been able to increase our contact million per month. A good part of these contacts refers to online services, which lead to being sent in the written form and with non-real-time tools. And we've created some automated tools that can support us in answering our customers' questions. I would rather not give you any numbers or the size, and I'd rather share any numbers regarding market initiatives, of course, things that we've already activated in the past and which have given us some obvious benefits in terms of results and efficiency. And we have a number of initiatives in the portfolio for the future. But based on our experience, I think what we've been doing so far is quite positive, and therefore that's the path we will continue to head in. And then when it comes to networks, we have implemented some initiatives that have been giving us some good results. Something that neither I nor Orazio have mentioned is the fact that we have some new regulations on gas leakages from our networks. Now, and over the past few years, we started using AI tools to support our physical activities, both in our investment plans and in our operational costs to look for leakages on the local territories. And we use machine learning to use past events mixing them with the age of the networks and the concentration of the various distribution points. So we were able to overlap these numbers, allowing us to reduce costs and to cut the amount of gas leakages by almost 50%, allowing us to obtain premiums, major premiums in the sector. And in the future, we'll continue to use these tools even more. And we'll be allocating our investments based on the statistical probability of damage on the networks, so that we can work on predictive maintenance, but also on the district organization of our networks. And by using the data relating to increasingly small pieces of the network, we can also study consumption trends. And by analyzing these trends with machine learning, say to analyze how much water is used in a specific territory, we can then identify leakages which are hidden, which aren't visible on the surface. And this is allowing us to drastically reduce the leakages on the network, which leads to premiums, of course, and which increases the system's resilience. And as far as predictive investments are concerned, it allows us to reduce OPEX regarding maintenance, which of course have an impact on our balance sheet.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much.
La prossima domanda
The next
di
question
Davide
is
Candela
by
di
Davide
Banca
Candela,
Intesa San Paolo.
Banca Intesa
Prego,
San
Davide.
Paolo.
Sì, buonasera.
Good afternoon.
Delle domande. Ne avrei due.
I have
La prima è sull'M&A,
two questions.
più
One is
concettuale che di impatto.
on M&A.
Non so, io sento un eco, non so se...
Noi non lo sentiamo, però
ok,
adesso vediamo se
Come non
riusciamo a
detto.
eliminarlo.
Forse c'è un microfono aperto.
I think there's an echo because your microphone is on.
Forse il mio microfono lo spengo.
Grazie mille. Torno sulla
Great, thank you.
domanda con riferimento all'M&A.
So I have a question on M&A.
Il concetto che di impatto. L'anno scorso,
It's more on the
quest'anno
concept rather than the impact.
impliciti di EBITDA che sono di 7
This
volte
year,
circa,
you
mentre
have
l'anno scorso, se ricordo bene,
implicit
lo
figures
stesso
relating to
gruppo prevedeva
multiples which are equal to 7
multipli
times.
di EBITDA
Last
di 6
year,
volte.
the implicit EBITDA multiple was
Chiedo
equal
più
to
che altro
6
la
times.
ragione per questo motivo. È
Uh,
una ragione di mix
Why is that?
diverso delle
Is it due to
assunzioni che
the
avete fatto? È una
different
ragione
mix in
che
your assumptions,
nel mercato, di fatto, per quelle che sono i target che voi vi aspettate in termini di qualità,
or is
sono
it
necessari multipli più alti,
linked to the
oppure perché magari il
targets you
vostro
see on the
budget dell'anno
market?
scorso
Do they
era molto
require
più
higher
restrittivo?
multiples, or maybe
Solo per capire un po'
was it the fact that
razionare questo
last year's
aspetto.
multiples were slightly
La
lower?
seconda domanda
Just to have an
torna
idea of the
invece
rationale.
al tema della capital
And then
allocation.
a second question on the
Avete
topic
detto
of
che
capital
soprattutto
allocation.
nel waste,
You said that especially in water and waste,
ci sarebbero delle possibilità di crescere
there would be the
maggiormente.
opportunity to grow
Di solito
more.
nei temi di visibilità mi chiedo dall'altra parte se vi siano dei
There are some
vincoli in
topics
termini
regarding
di
visibility,
autorizzazioni sul waste oppure
but do you
vincoli
have any
tariffari che di
constraints
fatto
in
non vi facciano
terms of
fare di più, come avete
waste or
detto
tariffs
comunque
which
lo
don't allow you
spazio
to
per
do more,
crescere, e collegato un po' alla capital
despite
allocation,
the fact that you
al
do have room to
dividendo e
grow,
della dividend
and also linked
policy,
to capital allocation
sulla parte finale di piano c'è una crescita
for your
significativamente
dividend
più
policy.
alta rispetto
In the
all'inizio.
final part of the business
La
plan period,
sensazione
there's
avversario è che
a higher growth compared to the
avete fatto
beginning
un
of the
passo in
business
questo
plan period.
senso e vogliate andare a remunerare di più
Mhm.
proprio perché avete più
The
flessibilità.
feeling is
Mi
that
chiedo se questa è
you
la
want to
ragione,
remunerate your
oppure dall'altra
shareholders more
parte, se
because you have more
portando più avanti
flexibility.
le crescite
Is that the
annuali
reason?
del dividendo si
Or is it
schiacciano e quindi
because
volevate dare un profilo di sviluppo annuale un pochino più equilibrato?
you
Grazie.
wanted to give a more balanced
Allora, intanto
outlook regarding
complimenti
the
a tutti
evolution of the
perché
dividend?
in 2 ore siete
Well,
entrati,
first of all,
diciamo,
let me
nel
congratulate all of you
dettaglio dei
because in
numeri
2 hours you went into
eh, veramente approfondito.
Such details regarding the numbers.
Parto con la parte concettuale
Now, let me begin with your
legata al tema del
question on the concept of value. It's probably the same value, it's probably the same multiple, but maybe as we were rounding up or rounding down, we added or subtracted some 10 million, and that changed the multiple. Although I think it was actually visible on one of the slides.
Non si vede nelle slide che abbiamo messo qua, però è complessivamente lo stesso
No, it isn't, but
valore.
it's the same value.
Può essere che da qualche parte abbiamo messo gli investimenti legati
Pretty
all'M&A,
much.
perché poi una volta
Maybe
che facciamo l'attività
we
di
included the investments on M&A, but then post-acquisition, we then invest on the acquired company. But in that case, they become organic development investments. But again, it's the same indicator theoretically compared to last year's. And maybe the only changes are due to figures which have been either rounded up or rounded down. So that's just a benchmark, of course. But then clearly, depending on the various mixes we're seeing in the sector, the numbers can change slightly given the effect of the mix, but it's basically in line with what we saw in the past. Moving on to your question on capital allocation. Well, for waste, we included everything which is in an advanced authorization phase or which has been fully authorized, which means that we are confident that that can be added to the business plan. What we didn't include is all of the initiatives which, for the time being, still aren't 100% sure they will be authorized, which is a condition we require. In the network sector, we are investing very much. There is room for further investment. For the time being, the increase is limited, and this doesn't have an impact on the tariff constraints. It doesn't generate investments in working capital. It doesn't have an impact on future tariffs, so we didn't do this. There could be potential room to do that. This is linked to a 40% increase in investments compared to the previous 5-year period. So basically, we're increasing things. And also consider that we have 500 million euros in investments we make, which are entirely financed by funds that we don't have to reimburse. The largest portion of that is linked to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, but we also have other types of funds as well. Now, what is the advantage of these investments? Well, for the group, that means that in regulated sectors, we can optimize costs which can be reduced through the effects of these investments. Take into account that some of these investments are aimed at reducing leakages in parts of the networks, and that will lead to benefits in terms of operational improvements. These investments also finance market activities. For example, rigid plastics and carbon fiber. A part of those investments are covered by funds, which allows us to reduce our invested capital, and it also allows us to optimize the plant's yield. For example, in hydrogen, We are developing the sector, we are creating expertise, and our invested capital is next to zero, which means that we are benefiting by an almost full coverage when it comes to investment. So that's why we have a potential 500 million of works that are included in the business plan, which don't absorb any cash, which gives us further room to do so in the next business plans. And we'll be also focusing on a further increase of the RAB.
Quindi questo è un po' il passaggio sulla capital allocation.
So that was the answer for the capital allocation question. Then you had a question on our dividend policy. Well, our reasoning was linked to two things. On the one hand, we're confident regarding 2025 figures, despite the fact that they were a challenge, given the major amount of temporary opportunities, but also we had a positive leverage. We had a positive debt to EBITDA ratio. And then we also considered the fact that our targets are marked by better performance in the business plan period, and therefore we have an exclusively structural growth scenario, and therefore we decided to increase dividends even more in the final part of the business plan period, also taking into account our financial flexibility and the fact that we will already have digested all the things we'll be doing in the next couple of years, the reduction in temporary opportunities, the fact that the SDG scenario will be stabilized, and therefore we will have some things which will go on top of the structural growth, and therefore, thanks to all that, we will be increasing the dividends in the same way. All of these things combined allow us to be very confident regarding the targets we'll be achieving. And that's why we increased our dividend policy. And as you know, this is a commitment regarding the cents per share. And over the past years, whenever our results improved, we always increased our dividend. And I was looking at the past 3-year period. We had a growth in dividends which was well above 25% compared to the past, with an outlook featuring a further 27% increase over the next 4-5-year business plan period. So we are working to make sure that our profits grow. 3 years ago, when we presented the first business plan that Orazio and myself had drafted, we were very focused on creating value, profitability, and bringing the effects of the development on the top line all the way down to the bottom line. And the track record we've achieved so far, I think, speaks for itself. And the projection for the future is headed in the same direction.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much.
Ingegnere Fabri, non ci sono altre
Mr. Fabri, there are no further questions. Well, I think you asked everything you could possibly ask, with plenty of details. But seriously, if you need any further feedback, please get in touch with Jens's office and with Luca Cimatti. And of course, we are always available for any extra questions. Thank you very much for making yourselves available. Thank you for this 2-hour discussion on our business plan. And we will be going on our roadshow soon to meet with investors.
Sentire e discutere anche con loro il nostro piano industriale e le prospettive future dell'azienda. Grazie mille, buona serata a questo punto, ormai il pomeriggio è quasi finito.